Hey all, welcome to Parker's Reefs. On today's episode, we're going to check out this, the Mastertronic Essentials, what could be the unicorn of automated reef aquarium testing. All right, guys, thank you for joining me on yet another episode of Parker's Reefs. And as touched on in the intro, today we are testing out and having a good deep dive into the highly anticipated Mastertronic Essentials, the all-in-one automated reef tester from the crew over at Focustronic. And let me tell you, this device is something that we've been waiting on for some time. It was teased quite a while ago, and there had been a few delays in getting it out into our hands, but it is finally here. And I want to go through today and see whether this device is what we've all been waiting for, and is it the unicorn of automated reef aquarium testing? Now, before we jump into that, I probably should take a step backwards and tell you what exactly this thing is. And firstly, it's an automated testing device that can cover magnesium, calcium, alkalinity, nitrate, phosphate, and even water clarity all in one. And there's a whole heap of other features that we'll get into as well, including things like the ability to adjust your dosing or even to switch things on or off, like calcium reactors, or change the schedule on your refugium light or things like that based on the results it gets. Super high promise, and this, like I said, this device did have a few setbacks and delays, so now that it's here, does it live up to the hype? Now, before we go into unboxing this beauty and setting it up on right here, the Dream Reef Tank, I should take a quick second to go over what is different from the original Mastertronic and the new Mastertronic Essentials. Now, first and foremost, the Essentials has set parameters. The original Mastertronic did give you the ability to pick which parameters and which reagents you wanted to use to test with, where the Mastertronic Essentials is a little bit more set. You are stuck to those parameters that we discussed before in alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, nitrate, phosphate, and water clarity. And your options regarding reagents are a little bit more limited than the original Mastertronic as well. You can use third-party reagents. There's some options from API and Red Sea Pro. But the big news here is they also have the ability to use the brand new Focustronic's own brand of reagents, which come in a much larger bottle and should work out being much more economical in the long run when you're doing lots and lots of tests, which you tend to do with an automated device. Now, that's not where the differences between the original Mastertronic and the new Mastertronic Essentials start and end. In fact, there are a heap of changes, from a heck of a lot less moving parts. There's no syringes in this new device for needles to get bent to do calibrations on. Every single one of the vials in the machine has its own line from the bottle to the reaction chamber, so there's no contamination between reagents. There's actually a drop counter that counts drops of reagent for a much more accurate test result, rather than relying on calibrating a syringe to go up and down. And then to round things out, this device also uses 40 milliliter vials to hold much more reagent in there, so you don't have to touch the machine as often. Once you load it up full of reagents, you can set it and forget it, let it do its testing, and not have to fiddle with it at all for weeks or months to come. But perhaps the best way to show you some of these features is to grab this box, take it over to my kitchen bench, we'll rip it open and have a look exactly what we get in the box, then we'll go about setting it up. All right, it's time to unbox this unit and go about setting it up. I'm very keen to see, because I believe that the exterior looks very much the same as the original Mastertronic. But obviously it's the inside where things have changed. Well, I'll just get that packaging out of the way. Okay, here we go. It's still a beast of a unit, there's no denying that. All right, one Mastertronic Essential and a whole bunch of very large 40 millimeter vials, which should hold quite a bit of reagent, particularly now that Focustronic are producing their own reagents. We're not going to have to buy test kits of other brands and then squeeze those few milliliters out of the bottle and into these vials. We're going to get a lot more volume in here, and let me get all of these out. It looks like we have 12 altogether, remembering that the Mastertronic Essentials does alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, nitrate, phosphate, and also water clarity. So that's all of my packaging out of the way. Now we can go through everything that we've got. Now, firstly, you've got the QR code, which is going to take you to the setup page so you can run through the process. If you're watching this video, I'll take you through, but it's always a good idea to jump on and follow along with that PDF just so you know exactly what you're doing. We do have 12, I believe, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 vials to go in this machine. We've got a power supply and a power cable. We have some mounting bracketry. Now, Focustronic have been very good at using the same style of mount in all of their products. It's got this just little hook section on the back here, and you can screw this into a wall or onto your cabinet or something, and you can simply hook your unit in there. It obviously also has rubber stoppers underneath, so if the surface you have that you're going to sit this on is perfectly horizontal in both directions, you can sit that directly on there. We get a little vial here, looks like for calibration purposes, and of course some water hoses. And then last but not least, our Mastertronic unit itself. Now, I did say that this looks very much like the original Mastertronic, but the first thing I can tell that is one huge difference is on the side here. There's simply a sample water in, a wastewater out, no other hoses connected. Also have a power supply, obviously, where we connect in. But when we open this bad boy up, and I'll get the camera in to show you guys through it when we set this unit up, we've got one test chamber here, and then sections for each one of our vials, and then lines that connect every single one of those vials. There's no mixing of reagents whatsoever other than in the test chamber itself. So it's probably time I open up that PDF and we'll go through setting this unit up. Alright, so here we are on the Focustronic website, and I'm just going to navigate through to where the manuals are. And of course, you can just follow that QR code, but I'm going to jump into the support section of the website here, and then I'm going to track down the manuals here, and that's going to take me to the listing of all their products, and the one we're after here is first and foremost Mastertronic Essentials. Now, we're going to open that up, and you get this nifty looking little electronic version of a book, which allows you to pan across and see all of these pages as you go. So you get the full table of contents and the limited warranty and all those things that we're not going to read. Support info tells you where to go if you have trouble, and then the basic philosophy. I'm not going to go into that, but essentially the Mastertronic Essentials replicates the tests you're doing by hand, and it does that with a few new slick tricks up its sleeve as opposed to the original Mastertronic. Now, you also get a little overview of the system itself. That's probably something you're going to look into more if you're doing troubleshooting rather than just initial setup. And then you get a little bit of an overview of the app. If you have not used any Focustronic products before, you are going to need to set up the app, download it, create an account, set up a tank, and get ready to add a product to it. But thankfully for me, I've already done that. Now, you also get a Mastertronic Essentials dashboard here, and this is where I will point out one thing before we get started, and it is some feedback that I have provided to Focustronic. I actually ran into a little bit of trouble with my setup because I still had my original Mastertronic set up on the same aquarium that I was trying to set up the brand new Mastertronic Essentials, and at least at the time of recording, the app did not handle that. It only likes one Mastertronic setup per tank, and it caused me a few issues, but that's either been resolved, or if it hasn't been resolved, I recommend you just remove your old Mastertronic off the app for that tank. All right. Now, let's get to the actual physical setup itself, which is over here, Mastertronic Physical Setup, and there are a few things here. It tells you to read through all of the steps and basically follow them to the T. You get a little mention of that mounting hook that we talked about before, and then about the lure connectors that are used for the two waters, the in and out. And that's basically also telling you the size of the hose and that you need to use the original hose. Or if you do go to aftermarket hose, make sure it's exactly the same size and length. And here is these two hoses, and this is their length. The original hose is 3 meters long, and it's important that you don't change that hose length. The Mastertronic Essentials does rely on pushing water back and forth amongst these hoses and having some built-in time set up so that if you shorten or lengthen that hose, that is going to create some issues. Now, another part where I did go wrong, and we'll discuss this a little bit further when we go through my results, but where your filter is, it's really a good idea to make sure that where the intake water is, that is, you have an inline filter that you can put inline. I actually had my filter float up and suck some air instead of water for a little bit, so they do actually recommend that you don't put the filter right at the end. I did, and I've since put a weight on it and it keeps it down. But essentially you have water in going in via a filter, into that lure connection and the water out going to a container. For me, it's going to the skimmer cup because that is plumbed up to the drain. Now, that's all fairly obvious stuff, and connecting up those hoses, as you can see on screen now, super easy. They come the right lengths already. Simply screw them into those connectors and fit up that filter on the inlet line, and you're good to go. All right, so the next thing, we have 3 different sizes of magnetic stirrer pills. There are a total of 4 of them. One is actually a spare. Now, the first one here is the big 20 by 8 millimeter stir bar with a pivot ring. That one goes into vial number 8. Next up, we've got the 15 by 5 mil with no pivot ring. That one goes into vial number 5. Then you've got the small 10 by 5, which goes into the reaction chamber itself. I can show you on screen where that is, but that's the basically the black plastic chamber where all of the reagents and waters go. And then you've got one 15 by 5 as a spare. Now, next up is the reagent pipe adjustment. You'll see in each one of these reagent vials, there is a little tube that goes down in there. You will need to adjust that for the vials that have the magnetic stir bars in there. Now, don't be silly like me. I actually cut the tubes because I thought that was the only way you could adjust them. And then I realized you could actually slide those tubes in and out via the lid, which makes it much easier to get that adjustment. No need to cut them at all. Just lift them up so that they are clearing that little magnetic stir bar. And then essentially you get onto filling up the reagents. Now, you can use, as the table suggests here, the recommended Focustronic brand of reagents, or you can go the third-party options from API, Red Sea Pro. In fact, they're the 2 brands you can use. I am fortunate enough to have the brand new, fully set up reagents from Focustronic, and they come in these large bottles, so I'm going to use those. It is super important, as you can see here, pre-install information on reagents, that you shake these ones in particular vigorously. Some of these reagents are prone to separation, hence the stir bars in there, and some of them are incredibly thick too, so be sure to give them a very good shake, particularly nitrate reagent 2, calcium reagent 2. They're the 2 ones that are really going to be bad. Same whether a Focustronic or API. Make sure you give those guys a good shake. To be fair, I gave all of my reagents a good shake, and then I started filling them up, which you can see on screen now, to the top of those vials, which is a 40 milliliter solution. Once you've got those all filled up, you can go about loading them into the Mastertronic Essentials itself. And then I've got to say, this does take a little bit of time, but you do get a very nicely laid out table telling you exactly where each reagent should go, and every single tube that is completely individual. They do not mix tubes at all, runs all the way from each vial up to the dropper, which counts the drops before they go into the reaction chamber. So every single tube has a number on it. Make sure you hook them up to the correct number. All right, that is all 12 of my reagents loaded in, shaken, not stirred, but the stir bars have been applied for those vials that required them and the specific sizes for each one of those vials. And I've got to say, some of these reagents are vastly different to others. Some of them are like a syrup, some of them are a toxic color, some of them just look like water. It's really interesting to see all of these Focustronic reagents, but what I do love about them is the size of these bottles. It is so much easier filling up these vials with a bottle like this than it is getting those little 10 milliliter droppers and either pulling the dropper out or squeezing it into a vial. So much easier to give this a good shake. Take it over to your sink and pour it into those vials there. And add to the fact these vials are now 40 milliliters of capacity. Makes a huge difference. If I have to be picky on one thing so far, I will say that the labels that come with the vials are near impossible to write on. And if you try to do it with pen, it doesn't seem to work. If you do it with texture, it just wipes off as soon as you touch it and you end up with texture on your hands. So I'll end up printing some things on my little Dymo label printer to make sure that they're very readable and that I do not at ever any stage mix up which vial goes where, because that will create all sorts of issues by mixing reagents. Now, there's nothing really else for me to do other than to take this over to my tank, put these lines with the filters, well, one filter for the water in, and the other one's just going to go into my skimmer because that's where my tank is plumbed to the drain. So it's as simple as that. I'll put those 2 lines in the water, I'll get those tubes in there, I'll hook power up, and then we'll jump on the app and follow through the setup there. Alright, so firstly I connected the device up to the power and you can see it initializes for a little while. Once that's finished, I'm jumping across to my phone and into the Focustronic app. Now I'm going to click on add and add a device. Here you can see all of the options. I'm going to pick the Mastertronic Essentials and we're presented with this 3-step initial setup. Now firstly we've got to connect it to our internet. So I'm going to jump back across to my Wi-Fi, find the Mastertronic Essential item here and put in the MT password and click join. Once we're connected to that, I'll jump back across to the app and we should be able to move on to the next part of the connection, which is putting in my actual Wi-Fi details. And here we are. So I need to make sure I put in my 2.4 gigahertz network, which for me is Parker, and then of course the correct password. Once that's done, you can click save and the device will save that in there and do a reboot. Now at this point in time, my device connected to the internet and downloaded some new system software, which did take a little while. I gave it a good 20-30 minutes before I had this notification tell me that we're connected to the internet. Now I can jump back in here now and continue on with my setup. And if I have a look in here, once it loads up, I'll be able to see my Mastertronic Essential here with no data saved in there whatsoever. But I can see that first time setup is there and it's asking me to set up my parameters. So I'm going to jump in here and go through each one of the parameters, selecting the Focustronic reagents and telling the device which vial each one of those reagents is in, and then go about setting a default time and day for that test. And I'm going to go through these parameters sequentially and set each one for a 1 p.m. test on the next day, obviously. So every single day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll get a parameter tested without me doing any sort of manual tests whatsoever. So just quickly scrolling through here, that's phosphate there now done. Go across onto calcium now. You can see it's quite simple. We pick the profile for the brand of reagents we're using, put in how many milliliters per vial we've got. Now obviously I've just freshly filled these, so they're all 40 milliliters, and I'm confirming which vials, in which number they are. They should be all in set positions, but always good to make sure as you're going there. So we're ripping through onto magnesium now. You see I've still got that yellow band across the top, which indicates that this is the initial setup. Once you've completed this initial setup, that goes away. It's just a little, I guess a little bit of a setup wizard to get us through. And you can see I'm still picking at 1 p.m. every day for my test. Now obviously you can build whatever schedule you want, but just for this point in time I'm just happy setting my parameters up. And this one here is the final one here, OLI, which is water clarity, believe it or not. The device can do that obviously with no reagents necessary. And I'm going to set that to test on Friday. So now I have my schedule built. I've got each of my parameters in there. Well, sorry, I've got alkalinity to go. So many parameters on this Focustronic device. Put in the reagents there, vial 6, vial 12, set that for Saturday, 1 p.m., save that, and we should now have all of our parameters set up. There we go, look at that, beautiful. I've got my schedule built, and you can just see that number on screen as it's saving all of those details up to the web now. Now the final step in our 3-step setup process after doing the connect and setting up our parameters is to calibrate the pump and test the accuracy. Now I unfortunately did not record this section on my phone, but thankfully for us the instructions are basically just screenshots from the app anyway. And you'll see here once you're on the 3rd step here, you simply click next and it will tell you to get your 10 milliliter vial ready, connect the waste line up to that. Start the test. It will prime the line first. Once it's finished priming, you're good to actually do the calibration. And once you go through that, you simply enter the volume of water that came through to your vial. Now you can do that a couple of times if you want to check the value to make sure it is spot on after you've made the adjustments. And then once you're all finished, you simply click next and you're ready to start your first test. Alright, so how exactly does this box of magic work? And you can see here I'm going to test it out on a calcium test, and that's because it uses 3 reagents. Now, the screen on the front has told us that it has started a calcium Focustronic brand of reagent test, and now it is preparing. And essentially by preparing, what that means is it's pumping water into the test vial, giving it a swoosh about with a magnetic stirrer, and pumping it out just to make sure that our vial is perfectly clean. If we open up the front hood of the machine, and I'll turn a light on so we can see what's going on here, you'll see that this pump here is actually now pumping water in here. Those have a little hose inlet and outlet down the bottom, so you can't really see the water going in, but then this pump comes on and pumps it out, just so it goes out into our waste. Now, I will point out that I have sped this test up a bit because it does take about 15 minutes, and I've tried to cut it down to about 5. You can see here we're pumping more water in, and in a second we will pump that water out again after giving it a little swoosh about in the vial. Now, the machine does do this a few times using that waste pump now, and it's a very small amount of water each time. We'll have a look at exactly how much water we use at the end of the test, but it does this a few times to ensure that our test is perfectly clean. Now, we are now at the point where hopefully, I think we're at the last time, we're putting our test water in, and this is where we won't pump this out. We'll actually test this water for calcium now. So here we go, we're filling up the test vial, and in a second we should actually see our reagents being added. Now, if we open the hood back up, you can see this little finger across the top here is spiraling its way across over the top of each one of these little hoses till we get to the correct reagent, and here it is here. Now that one is depressed by that little finger, you can see this little gear here turns, and that is going to start pumping our reagent out of the bottle, our calcium reagent number 1 out of the bottle, and I've sped that up. You can see that little gear there turning around, and before you know it, you'll see drops coming out from the little dropper there. Now, if we have a close look, any second now, we should see some drops. In fact, there's one, and we can see some drops coming out now. If I turn this light off, you'll be able to see there is a little LED in there that indicates every time it sees a drop, and you can actually wave your finger in front of this when it's not doing a test, and it will show red as well. Now, the little stir bar in there is ensuring that's fully mixed in as it adds the reagent, which is always good. And it's going to do that for a little while till it gets the correct amount of reagent 1. Then it's going to take what's left in the line and pump that back into the bottle. Next step, of course, is to give it a good little stir, and then we should have a look at adding our second reagent. So we're stirring away right now, and then before you know it, we should see our finger has moved across. It is starting to prepare by the second reagent by stirring it. You can see that one is a stirrable reagent, so it's giving it a good stir first, and then it will start pumping it in. We'll see that cog turn around. There it goes. So it does stop stirring before it pumps it in. That little cog is spinning around, and we're bringing our reagent out of that bottle, up through the machine here and down through the drop counter into the vial. Now, if I speed things up here a little bit, we'll get to the spot where our reagents drop in. In fact, I think we can start to see some now. Let's have a look. Maybe, maybe not. And there's some drops there. Sensational. I'll turn the light off so you can see the LED counter watching those drops go in to make sure it's got a precise amount. There's no more calibrating syringes or syringes getting bent and miscalculating things like that. So the machine has finished doing that reagent. It's going to pump the remainder of that back into that vial. It's giving that reaction chamber a good little spin. Now we're going to move across to the third reagent after we give it a good stir, of course. Our third reagent will go in, and that's when we get our fine level control to get our actual result. So let's see what we've got going on here. The machine is just stirring the results. In fact, I can actually see the LED there in the chamber is lit up. So we've got a red light in there, which is obviously something the machine does to help detect colors or something in there, although I'm curious by the red LED, but that's my guess or assumption. So this is after 2 of the 3 reagents. The machine has given it a good stir, and it's just sitting there for a second. Maybe it's curing those reagents, I'm not sure. It could even just be a wait period before adding the third reagent. Now you can see that LED has gone off, and our finger is moving across to the third and final reagent, and there it is there. It does intrigue me that the reagents are not next to each other, but I guess some of them require to be stirred and some of them don't. So that cog's now turning. We're going to pump that third reagent through. Let's have a look if we can see that come through. Speed things up a little bit here. And we should see some drops coming out there in a second. There we go. Our third reagent is dropping in. It's still dropping in fairly quickly at this point in time. You can see the LED flashing there as each drop goes in. But once we get close to the value, and we should actually see, I'll just speed things up a little bit here, we'll slow things down. We're still stirring there, of course, and the reagent's still being added in, but now we get to the point now where we're getting very close to the value, and it's obviously getting to the point where it can detect the color that it's looking for. I'll turn the light off. You can see the chamber is stirring and the LED in there is on, and we've got a very, very slow addition. Here it goes. It's just adding a very slow drop every now and then compared to how fast it was adding the reagent before. So it's getting really close to finding that set point. And then once it does, it's going to say, here's your calcium result, and go about rinsing itself out. So just waiting on that now. You can see that LED is on. We're still doing the titration here, so we are still onto that final step where it's not a set amount of reagent, it's the amount of reagent it needs to get the result. And you can see still very slowly dripping in. Now it is pumping the reagent that is in the line back into the bottle, which tells me it's probably finished its test. In fact, if I speed that up a little bit and we have a look at the front of the device, I think we'll actually have a result on screen now. And there we are, calcium of 409 mg/L, which is our result. Now all that's left for the machine to do is to empty it. You can see that hose there, empty out the waste, give it a little rinse and prepare it for the next test. Easy as that. And just to show the lack of water used, you can see here after a complete testing cycle, including pre-rinsing, adding reagent, rinsing and draining, I've got less than half a cup of waste here, a few drops of reagent at best, and a little bit of tank water. Very, very efficient. All right, now that we've had a talk about what the device is and does, unboxed it, set it up, and even gone over how it does a test, the next big question, and probably the most important question, is the device accurate? Now, I am super relieved and very excited to say that this thing has been incredibly accurate against all testing methods I have available to me, including recent ICPs, my SpinTouch, my Hanna checkers, and even Salifit manual test kits. This device has been very comparable against those. The only outlier being the magnesium result on my SpinTouch, but that was the odd one out compared to all of my other testing methods, so I think that just might need a little bit of a calibration there. Everything else has been very accurate and very repeatable, which gives me huge faith that the machine is doing exactly what it says it does. Now, if you have a look at the graphs and the results on my app, you'll see a couple of little spikes there, or drops, I guess, particularly around the nitrate curve and a couple of other parameters where I got some strange results and I thought, oh no, I finally discovered something wrong with this machine. It's going to throw out an odd result every now and then. I'm embarrassed to say that that was because I had fiddled about with the unit, mostly to get footage for this video. And when I'd put it back in position, the water inlet, the filter, because the device does spin the water backwards to empty that line out to get fresh water each time, it can actually float up. And I did have it weighted down, but I had a little bit too much lead in there, and it allowed that float to come up to the surface and suck air in, which gave me a 0 nitrate result instead of about a 7 ppm nitrate result, which is what I'm normally expecting. So you take those couple of anomalies out of my curves and they've been spot on. Now, just to really put this device through its paces, I've also made a few really rookie mistakes over the last few weeks whilst testing it. Firstly, my alkalinity and also my calcium, magnesium, everything did start to drop a little bit, particularly my alkalinity started to drop, and I thought, you beauty, I'm having a little bit of a growth surge in my tank, and I'll turn the dosing to my alkalinity up. And I turned it up, and the next result went lower again, so I turned it up, and it got lower again. So I was like, bugger this, I'm gonna double the dosing of my alkalinity, and it got lower again. So I had a look at my dosing containers and noticed that they were empty. So, of course, I've mixed up some new Triton Core 7 Flex, put that in there, and of course, now that my dosing is doubled, I did see a little bit of a jump back up as soon as the next alkalinity test took place, which I quickly changed things around because the last thing I want to do is have it going up and down. But the good thing was, despite all of these rookie mistakes and things that are probably not great for my tank, it was a fantastic opportunity for me to really put the Mastertronic Essentials through its paces, and it very accurately showed me where I was making these mistakes and what was going wrong, and really accurately depicted those results. So it has given me, in the last 3 to 4 weeks that I've had to play with this machine, huge confidence that it's going to tell me exactly when something is wrong with the tank. Next time I see that alkalinity dropping, and I have just recently upped my dosage, I might think a little bit clearer and go, better check that dosing container to see if that is empty. So a huge tick of approval from me on the accuracy of the device, and more importantly, the repeatability. If you have a look at some of those tests there where I've done 2 tests back to back, I do think the scale of the graph is a little bit misleading. One time I think I did a magnesium test and I think I had 1300 ppm as one result, and then I waited about 10 minutes after that test and did another magnesium test, and I got something like 1307 or 1309 ppm, basically exactly the same, like within basically 1% of the original result. And on the graph, it shows me a pretty steep little line between those two tests, when in reality, the scale should indicate that there's next to no difference. And when you have a look at the history of the results, you can see that it's much, much more consistent than that graph would suggest. So if you are looking at your results, be sure to look at the history of results. And don't forget, you can also set up alerts so that you can only have it notify you if it goes above or below your set range, rather than telling you every result. But for the purpose of this video, I really wanted it to tell me every single result we did, so I could really keep track of it and really put it through its paces over about 100 tests across 4 weeks. Now that does lead on to the next question around app usage and I guess general user friendliness of this device. Now, I will say that when I initially set this Mastertronic Essentials up, I did run into a little bit of a dead end, where I mentioned earlier on that I did not have my original Mastertronic taken off that tank, and then when I tried to add the new Mastertronic Essentials, the setup wizard got a little bit confused because it can only have one Mastertronic on the tank. As soon as I set up a secondary tank and put the new Mastertronic Essential on that, now I say secondary tank in the app, that is, obviously I still only have the one tank here, but just to put that on its own tank in the app, it was smooth sailing from there. And I've got to say, I think the Focustronic app has had a swarm of updates and fixes to it over the last number of months, somewhere between the last 6 to 12 months, because it continually gets better and easier to use. And I do find setting a schedule now to be considerably more user-friendly than it used to be. Really, really easy to go through, pick your parameter, pick the day, pick the time, or even set a repeat if you want to. But if you really want to get specific on testing calcium every Tuesday at 1 p.m, you absolutely can. Or if you want to test it every day, or you want to test it across various times throughout the day, you absolutely can, and it's super, super easy to set up. Likewise, I touched on before that if you want to set up the range for each one of these parameters that you're happy with, and you don't want to be spammed with push notifications for every test result, only if things get out of whack, very easy to set up. I can also say that if you want to get a little bit deeper into things, into the app, and really set up your automation, and I definitely recommend chatting to someone like Reddy Redwood, who is the support person for Focustronic. You can do things like getting your Dosetronic and getting the Mastertronic Essentials to then alter the dosage from the Dosetronic should things get out of whack. Or even if you want to go a step further and grab something like the Powertronic and have this device turn on or off devices based on the results. Now, the best examples I can think of there is if your nitrate or phosphate gets a bit low, you might want it to not turn on your refugium light, or you might want it to extend the time that refugium light's on if it gets a little bit high, or maybe even turning things like the solenoid off to your calcium reactor should your alkalinity, calcium or magnesium get a bit too high. But there is a whole bevy of opportunities for automation you can do with this device. When it comes to reef automation, I still like to just gently dip my toe in the water and really put a device through its paces first to make sure that it can do exactly what I want it to do and that it's accurate and repeatable. And I do that on monitoring mode first, and then I do the actions myself. But I've got to say, whilst it's only been 4 weeks, I'm very, very confident after the 4 weeks that this device could be the one that I finally get to the point where I do take my hands off the wheel and let the automation gods run my tank. We'll see as time goes on. All right, now one point that a lot of people are going to be curious on, and I'm sure you've probably already followed links to find out, and that is how expensive is this device to purchase and also to run in the long term. Now, I can say I personally think Focustronic have done an incredible job at keeping this device to $2,600 Australian for the purchase of the machine itself. Now, I know that's not a small, loose bit of change. However, considering what this does and compared to some of the alternatives on the market, I think this is incredibly well priced. And throw into that the fact that Focustronic now sell their own reagents, so you don't have to go and buy 50 test kits from your local fish shop of all sort of different things and crack off the little droppers of those vials and pour them in. You can buy these big bulk reagents, and that set of all parameters comes in at $340 Australian. And I've got to say, after running 100 tests through my machine, I have barely touched the surface of some of those reagents. And that's just in the initial 40 ml vial. I still have hundreds of milliliters of reserve in the bottles to top them back up when they run out. So I can say that over the course of a year, this device is going to be very economical to run, which I think is very, very important in this day and age. Now, loosely running on from the cost is the maintenance and reliability of the device. Now, I've got to say, compared to the original Mastertronic, where we had actuators and arms and motors spinning around and vials doing all sorts of things, all of our vials remain in place. There's no syringes, no needles to bend, no calibration of those things at all. It's only two pumps. One's the waste pump that you don't really need to calibrate at all. The other one is our water delivery pump, which is super, super easy to calibrate. There's just not a lot of moving parts in this machine. Add to the fact that it's got that drop counter so that if it does by chance pick up air in the vial, if you've adjusted the those little tubes inside the vials a bit wrongly and it's drawing air instead of reagent, the machine knows and is going to tell you. Or if you're getting a bit of intermittent fluid through there, it's not going to give you a bad result. It's just going to say, hey, I've got no reagent, which I think is incredible. And whilst I can't tell you what it's like over a 6, 12, 18 or 24 month period, I can say, looking at the machine and looking at the limited number of moving parts in there, I think this thing's going to be rock solid for a long time to come. All right, so with all of that in mind, I guess I will wrap things up with what my thoughts are on the machine. I've got to tell you, it takes a lot for me to be this impressed, particularly when it comes to reef automation. There is not much out there that I have not had my hands on. And I've got to say, this Mastertronic Essentials was absolutely worth the wait. The device is cost effective to purchase, very quiet to run, very rock solid on moving parts and maintenance. Looks like it's going to be a very solid device. And most importantly, is incredibly accurate and easy to use. I don't know if I could find many things that I would say as a con for this device. I guess if I really had to pick at something, I would say that that little faux pas that I had setting up when I still had the original Mastertronic on the app, and then it created a little bit of a problem for me with the setup wizard. I had to then manually go in and do the calibration, but it really set me back probably 2 to 3 minutes of time, and it wasn't that hard to work out. And I guess if I wanted to be really, really difficult, I could say that this machine's still pretty large. In fact, it's exactly the same exterior dimensions as the original Mastertronic. So if you're trying to put this on a 2-foot cube or something like that, you're gonna need to find a fair bit of space in your cabinetry or around your tank. But on something like a tank this size, it takes up a fraction of the space in your cabinet space. And for all of the parameters it covers, I think it's absolutely worth it. Oh, I nearly forgot one of my biggest cons of this product, and I know it's comical, but this was the only thing that really gave me grief. That was the included labels that I decided I could fix very easily by using my Dymo labeler here to print out some labels with what number vial and what reagent is in them. I have to admit, how good is the product when the biggest con I can come up with is that the labels that you attach aren't the best quality, and that you can simply fix that by printing your own labels out like that. And how good does that look? Beautiful. And what an upgrade that is. Now I can very easily tell which vial is which and which reagent I need to fill up. Now, of course, that is just my opinions, and whether it's going to suit you and your reef tank and your journey is completely up to you. I just want to present you guys with the information that I've found while testing this device, and like I said, I'm very, very thoroughly impressed. If you are interested in purchasing one, and by all means, don't take it as any sort of pressure, but if you are interested in purchasing, I have included a link in the description down below, which is an affiliate link. So if you do go to purchase one, you may as well follow that link, and that will give me a small kickback. Now, by no means do not think that that means I'm telling you to go buy one because I'm going to make money out of it. Far from it. If you are in the position where this device may suit you and your reef tank, and you're going to purchase one anyway, I'd highly appreciate the little kickback, because it does go a long way to making it possible for me to do reviews on products like this. So check out that link below if you are interested in any of the Focustronic range. Now, I will wrap things up there, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. It's been running for a little while now, but I've been waiting to bring this one to you for so long. Firstly, the wait for the Mastertronic Essentials to get here, but then once it landed here, I wanted to set it up and put 100 tests through the machine so I could really give you an informed opinion, but rather than just going, here it is, I've unboxed it and set it up, here's the link to go and buy one. I really wanted to put it through its paces to make sure that what I was telling you about the machine actually had a little bit of concrete behind it and something that you could trust. Now, I do want to just give a quick shout out to these names on screen here. These are my channel members who chip in a couple of dollars each and every month, and I really do appreciate the work these guys do. It makes it much, much easier for me to get my hands on products like this one so that I can give a good, thorough, and unbiased review for you guys at home. So thank you very much to all of my channel channel members. If you do want to support the channel but you don't have a couple of dollars a month to spare, I completely get you. If you have not done so yet, please consider subscribing. It takes 2 seconds of your time, will not cost a cent today, tomorrow, or any time in the future, but it does help the YouTube algorithm out a lot by telling other like-minded reefers that this is a good channel, has good content, and they should watch it as well. And we're getting very close to that 34,000 subscriber mark, which is truly ridiculous and incredibly humbling. So thank you very much for following the journey. But I will wrap things up there, guys. I will just finish off by saying, if you do have any questions, comments, feedback, anything about the Focustronic range, the Mastertronic Essentials, any of the tests with that unit, or anything with my Dream Reef tank, feel free to pop it in the comment section down below. I do personally reply to each and every comment there, so it is by far the best way to get hold of me. Now, I will finally wrap things up there, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Till next time, stay safe, keep reefing. Cheers, bye.